name is Lauren Hollows, and today I am continuing our interview series, and I'm lucky enough to have Jason Ash from Mr Wed. Now, Jason and I go back a long way. Jason's been in industry for quite a while, and as with everything else, we're going to have AI talk about his skills. So Jason Ash is the general manager of Mr Wed Training and Assessment, an Australian RTO that specialises in training trainers, educators and learning managers. He has over 20 years experience in the training and development industry and has worked with a wide range of clients, including government agencies, corporate businesses and educational institutions. Jason is a highly skilled and experienced trainer and is known for his ability to create engaging and interactive learning experiences. He's also a passionate advocate for lifelong learning and believes that everyone has the potential to learn and grow. Jason is the winner of the Platinum Award for Best Young Learning Leader at LearnX in 2011. He was named a Young Trainer to Watch by the US Training Magazine, two-time Mr Wed Trainer of the Year, and one of only 2 Australian trainers to be certified in Bob Pike's Train the Trainer Bootcamp. Jason, welcome. Did it get it right?
Lauren, that was fantastic. I was really nervous about what AI was going to come up with there, but that was fantastic. So thank you. Great intro.
So you and I have known each other for a long time through, presenting at Velg and Mr Wed, and we've collaborated a couple of times. But tell me, obviously Mr Wed is a TAE training provider. Probably one of the biggest and most well-known in and around the country. What is happening with Mr Wed at the moment?
Lauren, it is all happening, as they say. So we're obviously in amongst the rollout of the new TAE 40122 Certificate for in Training and Assessment, and in the teach-out period of the old TAE 40116. So, things are really busy at Mr Wed. We've got a lot of students we're supporting through to the end and helping them finish their TAE 40116 version of the qualification, and trying to help them get complete and issued and up to date to meet those regulatory standards. But also we're starting our new groups in the 401. We've been rolling that out around the country over the last couple of months.
And I know that Marc was involved in a lot of the feedback and dialogue and the reviews. He sat on the committee with Andrew Shea. How have you guys found the final structure of the 40122? It never gives us everything that we want, but how are you finding the rollout? How are the students responding to it? Are you seeing good uptakes? How is all of that going?
Yeah, look, it's been an interesting transition, I think, this time, and I think the focus of not having the upgrade per se, the way it's been previously, has had a really mixed impact on the industry. We've obviously got a lot of students that are very happy that they feel like they're not obliged to upgrade again this time, and the regulators, and I'll be very clear on this, that it's definitely not something that's required. But we've been surprised by how many people are looking to do it anyway because they want to get updated, they want to go to the new version. Or they feel like that this might change in the future, so they want to get ahead of the curve and still get their so-called upgrades done.
Yeah.
But look, I think overall it's been a great response to the new course. We're really happy with the new program we've put together. We've made a lot of big changes to the way we're running it, getting back to some of our roots around the focus of face-to-face training and assessment and giving people more opportunity for classroom time. Which is, been the great uptake. That's where it's been most exciting to hear people coming through that channel again.
Yeah, and obviously, because there is quite a lot of, we've gone from having 9 core units and 1 elective to having a lot more choice in the qualification. Yeah. What were some of the, what are the electives that you guys are focusing on? What were some of your thought processes and feedback that went in behind that?
Yeah, so we obviously, part of the review process, if you like, we got a pretty good insight into what industry was asking for and the early feedback around the electives. But for us, it was more about getting back to, I guess, some of our core clients we've worked with for a long time. And they're most excited about having some choice back into their journey again. I think many would agree that the 9-1 model wasn't really what was fit for a lot of organisations, and a lot of industry groups didn't feel like they were heard in that space. So now we're getting that opportunity to be more more agile, develop better customization programs and focus on electives that are going to be more suited to some of our key clients we've worked with for a long time.
And is that kind of
in our
allowed
public
you guys
space,
to go back to like the training side of things? Because I think that was, I think a lot of people felt that was missing, like from that last version of the qualification, is it really moved away from engagement. And that's such a huge part of what Mr Wed is known for, is, how you go about engaging and creating that relationship with the student.
Yeah, look, to some degree, I mean, there's not a lot of new focus on the delivery and facilitation skills in the new qual. Like, that wasn't really enhanced so much. But by having those different choice of electives, it's allowed us to do more with them. So in our case, we've set up 2 standard pathways that we're using with a different set of electives. So we have one pathway that focuses around the online and distance education electives for the trainers and assessors out there that are staying in that world. And I guess our post-COVID world of using more, Zoom meetings, team meetings to deliver training, but also using that same online technology to facilitate assessments differently. So we've got one set of elective pathways that focus on that stream, and we have a separate set of electives for sort of the anti-online trainers and assessors. So it's a pathway that's focused on supporting work skill instruction and on-the-job training and assessing, mentoring in the workplace, those types of more, I guess, the more face-to-face skills in that. So that gives us some different choices, which has been really interesting to see the take-up of those 2 different pathways for us.
And so, yeah, because that kind of takes you back to kind of that old school, I guess the harder vet apprenticeship model sort of stuff. So do you see a big difference in the types of trainers, or like, is there specific industry areas that will, be more inclined to certain one model over the other model, that sort of thing?
Not yet. It's been a pretty even mix. I mean, there's some industries that are definitely leading towards the supporting work-based learning pathways, being that they're industries that don't traditionally use a lot of online and distance education and might have been forced into that model for a while. But, as soon as they could, they got back to the on-the-job side of things. What we have found the most interesting is that we're offering all of these pathways via both our face-to-face public classrooms and now self-paced online courses. And overwhelmingly, our self-paced online courses are choosing the online and distance education model, and our face-to-face students are overwhelmingly choosing the supporting work-based learning pathway. So that in itself is sort of interesting. I don't have anything to quantify that yet. It's still early days. It's been an interesting observation we've had.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm interested to know then, because you guys have got a few trainers there now, when you're recruiting trainers, I mean, I can imagine, TAE is such a hard industry to recruit people. Like, when you're recruiting trainers, do you have trainers that tend to specialize in each of those streams? And like, what are the things that you look for in a TA? Like, what are the things that you look for in a really good TAE trainer?
Yeah, look, for me, content expertise is slightly less important to me than the ability to engage and motivate learners. So we've found over the years that we've had the greatest success with our training team, and we've hired people that really fit that Mr Wed culture and approach, and that are passionate about that engagement in learning. And then looking at the core skills that they possess, and then using that to develop our people in the right pathways of what they want to do with those skills.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and I'm sure any other providers out there in the TAE space will probably tell you the same, it's incredibly hard to find TAE trainers at the moment. Those that have got the right qualifications and skill sets to start with, and then also those that sort of fit in with all the models that you're looking for. It's a tough time. But I don't think that's just TAE related. I think that's generally speaking, there's a bit of a recruitment lull generally across the country for vet trainers and assessors.
And like when we look at those 2 models of engaging people face to face and engaging people through the online mediums, it kind of makes sense to me to go, well, from an emerging perspective, you know, we've got this whole generation of people coming up through social media, you know, so I would look at that and go, our younger generations are naturally going to be more inclined to relate to people through the internet. But, you know, engaging people to actually train them through the internet is like an entirely separate thing. Do you see that is going to have an impact on TAE trainers kind of coming up over the next generation? Are we going to see a lot more who will struggle probably a little bit with that face-to-face model because they've struggled to develop those skills in real life as well? Like, you know, do you see it more moving towards that kind of online sort of a model, or do you think it's going to kind of balance itself out?
No, look, we think it's going to balance back out. So the early uptake we had, so when we did our TAE 22, I'll call it the TAE 40122 sort of consultations, and we spoke to a lot of our industry partners. We did some surveying at Velg last year. We spoke to a lot of people about that focus of whether we think this world of online learning and education is going to be around the same way post-COVID, I guess, or whether people will be starting to get back to what we might call normality in our training. And it was pretty clear cut for us that most of the organisations and people we spoke to were really looking forward to getting back into the classroom and getting back to their core roots of face-to-face training and assessment. I don't think we'll ever go back to where we were before. I think there'll always be an element now that I think online and distance learning proved during COVID that there is a space for it in a lot of industries and a lot of organisations. And a lot of our industry groups that we worked with that never thought they could do their courses via online and distance made it work. And in some cases are really happy with what they produced and are going to continue to run that as a model. But I think many are looking to get that balance back and making it more of a, you know, it's a new option that we have in our product suite. It's not the way forward for everything. And I'm sure that'll be different depending on organisation and industries. But yeah, definitely we've seen more of a willingness to go back to that face-to-face than that I think you would have expected a couple of years ago if you'd asked the same question.
I think people developed an appreciation for it during COVID, being starved of it for a little while. There was definitely an appreciation.
There's definitely a love-hate relationship with a lot of it now, I think. Yeah.
So if I guess, I mean, one of the common arguments, like if you talked about online learning and online assessment, you know, 2 to 3 years ago, pre-COVID, one of the things that would come out from a lot of people was like, well, you can't deliver a qualification.
Can't do this.
You can't deliver it compliantly. You can't collect evidence compliantly. And obviously for some qualifications, that's 100% accurate. But we have come a long way in relationship to how we can go about like collecting and building evidence through online mediums in a compliant way. When you guys go about building your courses, do you have quite distinct like assessment tools for when you're developing in the workplace, like when you're collecting through the workplace or when you're collecting through face-to-face versus collecting online? Like what's the thought process that you guys have taken into this kind of being, I mean, with your assessment tools being some of the most scrutinized in industry, how have you worked through that process?
Yeah, so for me, it's really getting back to what the unit is asking for and then challenging what can I do with the medium I've got available to me. Because there are definitely times that the online and distance education space is actually easier to assess in some things, and particularly when there's unique moments in time that you need that you can't always replicate in a face-to-face training. Or I go and do a site visit and say, okay, today I need to see you deal with an escalated customer. Well, I didn't get one today. So there's times like that some of those other mediums where we can use things like recording and uploads and so forth, that you can capture those moments in time, sometimes better than going face-to-face. But fundamentally, I think for us in the TAE space, it was really about finding that balance between what we can observe ourselves versus what we need to have recorded and published versus what we can start to lean on other people with the right credentials to help us in that that kind of third-party perspective, and trying to find the balance between those things sometimes where the verifications become more important than ever before. The following up of our assessors is more important than ever before because we were starting to rely on other parties more than we ever have pre-COVID. So I think under the 40122 version, we had to really sit down and start to split those things out and say, okay, well, what can we faithfully represent in our classrooms for our face-to-face training that's going to give the learners the best experience, but also give us the strongest portfolio of evidence? And then if we now take this into an online space, what do we do differently with that? How do we get the same robustness out of our decisions, but using different suites of evidence collection activities to get to that same place? So definitely a lot more thought has to go into it, I think, these days.
Yeah. And I think that's just a response to the market anyway, with like learners having access to so many different online learning tools, not accredited necessarily, but your Khan Academies and your mass, your MOOCs and things like that. Just an expectation of what online training is. Uploading a PDF is not, most learners now, I think, look at that, that's not online training. Like, we expect, the expectations are much higher.
Absolutely. And I think that's something I think that came out of that response of COVID. I think organisations that didn't think they could develop online learning had to, and then they created some really cool stuff that they wouldn't have considered doing beforehand. And now that's set a new expectation for the different industries. And as you said, as a learner, I want micro-credentialing. I want short, sharp bursts of content that I can consume when and where I want to. And even, our television habits have changed over this time. I talk to so many people now that the idea of sitting down and watching full-length movies is hard. They want to sit down and watch, binge 4 episodes when they feel like it, not go to the cinemas and watch movies.
Yeah.
I got a younger family, and my daughter's 14, and the idea of her sitting there and watching a movie with us is horrifying. So she's like, I'm not sitting here for 2.5 hours and watching one thing. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I think the way we develop that online learning has to be a bit more agile in that space, and needs to be consumed in a way that the learners can do it when and where they want to. Even down to the enrollment processes
is really important. Like, learning how to chunk up content is definitely going to be one of those. From the design perspective, it's going to be something that they've really got to learn how to do effectively. Like, what can I chunk? How can I make it digestible? That it has to be a factor.
Yeah, if I've only got 30 minutes available to me and I want to do something productive with that 30 minutes, can your online self-paced version of the course, can that support me in that learning model? I don't want to have to sit down and, open, a 70-page PDF document and highlight my way through it for 3 hours so I can start answering some questions. I want to be able to go, content, consume it, work on, and then go turn it off and come back again in 3 or 4 hours when I've got another 30 minutes and pick up where I left off.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because having attended many of yours and Marc's sessions at places like Velg and different industry events over the years, that understanding of learner engagement and how long you can keep a learner for before you've got to switch things up or add something in, that's always been very inherent to, like, that's been a core part of your guys' training for as long as I can remember. So I imagine that that's been quite helpful in relationship to thinking about how you plan out full days of training, how you plan out your online training, how you chunk all of that information in, and the things that you need to do in order to keep the training progressing forward, as opposed to like that death scroll online of like, I'm just going to flick through this and get to the question. And then if I F up the question, I'll go back to the materials and Control F and find out where that bit of the knowledge is.
Yeah.
So you guys are presenting this year at Velg. Both yourself and Marc are presenting. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're presenting this year and why you chose your topics?
So both Marc and I are presenting on the Friday this year, so both on day 2. I've got a morning session, which is on amplifying learning using core, which is based around a bit like what you were just mentioning. It's the closing, opening, revisiting, and energizing approach. So I guess just breaking that down into how we engage learners throughout that learning activity, through right from the start of when they start their session right to when you close your session, and how do you keep them going during the session. So That'll be a fun one. It's a similar theme to sessions I've run before at Velg that have always been quite popular. So you'll get some new activities this year, though, but same genre, if you like. And Marc's attacking a new session, which is around digital resources. So he's going to share 10 digital resources that will help you wow your learners in that online space. And he'll be playing a little bit with AI and so forth during that session and giving you some examples of how that can be used to engage and sort of support learning.
And that's, I mean, look, that's been a big theme of what we've been talking about throughout this whole interview series, is how AI is going to, you know, how it's going to change our industry, how it's already changed our industry. So, you know, we've had conversations with Vanessa McCarthy, who runs an AI software system that does validation. You know, we've spoken to Ray, who is, you know, runs Accelerate, and obviously is starting to build AI capabilities into that. You know, from your guys' perspective, again, really hard, being that you work in like probably the most highly regulated of all the training packages. You know, there has to be such a strong focus on compliance, and yet engagement and innovation also is just part of inherently who you guys are. How do you see AI, you know, impacting things moving forward? You know, what do you know, how are you guys starting to plan for that? What are you excited about in that space?
Oh, look, for me, you know, AI has been around in one format or another for a really long time. We've just put more of a face to it at the moment. But if you think about AI right down to things like enrollment processes, we've been using some AI systems for a long time to help navigate through the process, to be able to connect the dots in an enrollment, to know if I choose this option, what happens next. All of those are all fundamentally AI situations or API calls between your systems. I think the real difference for us now is that accessibility to what people are seeing as genuine conversational AI, if that's the right term, where, like you did with my bio, you can ask it a question and get all of these great answers. I think the challenge for us will be around that, what constitutes as plagiarism and so forth moving forward. And that'll be one of our, I guess, industry conversations that'll have to keep happening. I use the analogy, I remember my 10th grade math teacher telling me I needed to learn long division because I'd never have a calculator in my pocket when I needed it. And look where we are these days with technology. You're never anywhere without a calculator in your pocket, or these days on my wrist, you know. So we need to learn to embrace that technology a little differently. And when we're using AI in training, I think it's about innovation. It's about finding things to do differently that you wouldn't have normally done, because it might have been outside of your skill set or outside of your standard genre. That's where AI can help fill the gap for us, I think, and, you know, challenge us to do things a little bit differently. And, you know, we need to write better than the machines. That's going to be the future for us as trainers, I think.
And I think writing with the machines as well. I mean, I certainly know our within Adawaya, we use it quite a lot, but it really does boil down to like helping the team to understand like what prompts are helpful, what prompts aren't helpful. You know, that it is a tool. Like when I was coming up through high school,
tool.
You know, one of the things we had to learn was how to structure that Google search. Like, you know, depending on how what terms you put into the Google search, it would come up with, you know, something not useful or something useful. That's very similar to kind of how we're learning to deal with prompts with bots.
Yeah, and even just from my perspective in creating some of the new assessment work we're doing, I've used AI a few times where I've sort of created an assessment task or a project, and I've sort of, thought, I'm not sure if I've worded this well. I'm not sure if I'm going to get the right response from the candidate. I wonder what people would say in this case. And then I've put those terms into AI and said, okay, what are you going to come up with? And it gives you a bit of an indication. Then it comes back and you get an answer from AI that makes sense and it's in the genre of what you're looking for, and you know, okay, well, my question's framed okay. Or you get back something completely random and you go, okay, is that an AI problem or is that a problem with the way I framed the question? And are my learners likely to read it the same way that the AI did, in which case, you know, I probably need to reframe this or ask it a little bit differently. So I think it's just another tool.
It's something that we don't do enough, like that asking that question of like, I understand this because I have all of this knowledge, but is my learner going to understand it? Like, let's just strip back all of the knowledge that I have about writing assessments and this qualification in this particular area. you know, have I asked the question in a way that my learner is actually going to understand it? Like, have I written the project in a way that my learner is actually going to understand it? Like, that's all things that I think that we don't do enough of, in really good assessment design.
And it helps us with our continuous improvement as well to start flagging things. And I've also got a whole bunch of sample answers that came from AI, so our assessors can make sure they keep a close eye on that as well.
100%. So I guess last question, what is something that you're excited? Is there something that you're excited about in our industry? Is there something that you're looking forward to? What's exciting you about that at the moment?
Look, to be honest, Lauren, my whole world at the moment is the TAE 40122. That's all I'm living and breathing at the moment. But that is in itself an exciting change to the qualification. I think generally speaking, it's much more industry appropriate and people are a lot happier. As you mentioned earlier, there's a few quirk things in there that you sort of think, oh, that's probably not what I would have done if I'd had my perfect way. But for the most part, it's given us a lot more choice. And at Mr Wed, we're just real excited about getting back to what we did well and looking at, getting that classroom training back and the uptake in our classroom, working with our corporate clients to keep building these really unique training programs for them that include these TAE qualifications. And I think the other big one for me is seeing that the really early uptake in skill sets for people moving forward has been a great response, because I've always been a big advocate, big fan of skill sets, but I think they've been a bit lost in our industry. Whereas I think under the new TAE package, these skill sets are a lot more definable, a lot more appropriate, and make a lot more sense. So I think we'll see a much bigger uptake of that micro credentialing as it moves forward.
100%, definitely. So for people who want to sign up for a Mr Wed course, or want to come out and see yourself or Marc, where is the best place for them to find you?
So mrwed.edu.au is the website, or you can give us a call on 1-800-287-246 and speak to one of the team that'll answer the phones there and talk you through everything you need to know. But look, we have our Yours in Training subscriptions if you want to keep up to date with what's happening in Mr Wed. We are trying to keep up with our social media presence, which has been a bit of a challenge for us this year, but we're still there. So if you follow us, we will communicate with you at some point. But yeah, otherwise, come and see us at Velg. We're going to have a booth set up at Velg as well, so we'll have a stand. So feel free if you're at the event to come and say hello. Tell me that you saw us on Lauren's interviews.
Thank you so much, Jason, for joining us. For everybody who wants to, I will pop all of those links down below in the video description. My name is Lauren Hollows for Anawaya. This was Jason from Mr Wed. As per usual, as you guys got any questions, drop them down below in the video. I will do my best to answer them. Or you can reach out to Jason on all of that information that he's provided below and will be in the video description as well. Thank you so much for your time, Jason. My name is Lauren Hollows for Anawaya Education Services.